Hello, I'm Benjamin Limmer, Bureau Chief for Public Transportation at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And I'd like to welcome you to Along the Lines, a podcast series where we'll share exciting news and updates and explore current issues and ideas on Connecticut's public transportation system. Today, we will be discussing an exciting as well as innovative vision from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. It's called Compass Rail. This initiative aims to enhance rail service and mobility by linking some of the region's more rural communities to major employment as well as education corridors. Compass Rail will create new north-south intercity rail service throughout the Connecticut River Valley, as well as east-west routes linking Boston and Albany, using Springfield as the hub of the Compass Rail operations. Another exciting component of this plan is the proposed route, which will connect New Haven and the CT Rail Springfield Hartford line corridor to Worcester and Boston. This will really create a transformative impact on the entire region as well as our transportation network. So I'm especially thrilled to welcome today's guest, as well as my neighbor to the north, Meredith Slesinger, MassDOT's Rail and Transit Division Administrator, to discuss this bold vision and its critical role in driving the region's economy. So Meredith, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Ben. It's exciting to be here and to get to talk to you outside the context of a fairly long meeting.
Absolutely. That's always welcome. So, Meredith, to start things off, could you share a brief history of how the Compass Rail concept came to be?
Absolutely. So, MassDOT has been supporting Amtrak operated intercity rail on the north south corridor between New Haven and Springfield, and more recently further north to Greenfield for several years. And since we concluded our east west passenger rail study in 2021, that included a favorable assessment for better connecting the western and eastern parts of Massachusetts by rail. And so we made a strong commitment toward expanding our intercity rail portfolio. And with the passage of the IIJA, which included substantial funds available for intercity rail projects, we really felt we needed a brand to help tell our story and sell our vision for intercity rail in the Commonwealth and beyond. The title Compass Rail, which I'll credit my all-star colleague John Weston with conceiving, plays on the blend of Commonwealth of Massachusetts and passenger rail, but it's also symbolic of the north-south and west-east routes that meet at a robust hub in Springfield. And another goal of developing Compass Rail was to establish clarity on corridors we are pursuing, but also demonstrating the incremental nature of their phasing. For example, many people in Massachusetts talk about West-East Rail, or as it's often called, East-West Rail. So we're indeed advancing West-East Rail service along the Boston and Albany corridor, but will be accomplished with compounding projects. Compass Rail illustrates the individual routes that comprise West-East Rail, which allows us to speak to our strategy for incremental implementation.
So, Meredith, you and I know what intercity rail means. I think a lot of our loyal and frequent customers know what it means as well. But can you explain what intercity rail means and how it's different from quote unquote commuter rail?
This is such a good question, and one that is really dictated at the sort of federal statutory or legislative level. So when we talk about intercity rail, we're talking about generally longer distance routes connecting major markets and with fewer stops along the way than, say, a commuter rail, or what we're calling actually in Massachusetts regional rail, just to make things a little bit more complicated. The history of commuter rail is essentially bringing people in from the suburbs to a downtown core and back out again at morning and evening, sort of traditional rush hour times. Does that help?
It certainly does. No, I think that clarifies for the listeners. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, Compass Rail does consist of two now intercity rail corridors. Of course, you mentioned briefly the inland route, as well as the Boston Albany route. Could you give us an update on the development of each of these two rail corridors?
Absolutely. So, we've been really fortunate over the past few years in receiving federal discretionary grants to advance both of these important corridors. And the federal discretionary is important because there is no federal formula funding for intercity rail. So, we have to either do this with state money or generally a combination of state money and federal funds on a competitive basis. So, our early actions for the Inland Route Grant will be the first tangible progress people will see on the West East Rail Corridor. So, we received a $108 million grant from the Federal Railroad Administration, and we're building a series of track improvement projects between Springfield and Worcester that will help enable 2 daily round trips between Boston and New Haven. The service will include stops in Worcester and Springfield and many stops along the Hartford line. So we've made progress on this effort by developing a simulation model along the West East Rail Corridor that allows the project team to test service scenarios and various infrastructure projects that could help create corridor capacity. And this effort, done in partnership with freight carrier CSX and with Amtrak, was recently awarded an Innovative Transportation Solutions Award from WTS Boston. And for those who don't know, that's a women's organization for transportation professionals. So our next step is to begin design, which we expect to occur early in 2025, with construction to begin in 2027, and the resulting service is slated to start in the 2029-2030 timeframe. The second route we're advancing, the Boston and Albany corridor, has been accepted into the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor ID program. This program provides funding for a service development plan that will clarify the route's planned service levels, capital needs, and other necessary details, such as a governance structure. This plan, which is expected to begin in early 2025, will also study how services will coordinate at Springfield, including the potential connections with the CT rail trains. The Corridor ID program is unique in that there is an associated federal source to fund the capital projects identified through each corridor service development plan. This gives us a lot of reason to feel optimistic about the route and Compass's rail expansion west of Springfield to Pittsfield and Albany. And I imagine Connecticut is feeling similarly optimistic as its Hartford line corridor is also part of FRA's Corridor ID program. Right, Ben?
And why the timing of this podcast is working out well. There's a lot going on in Massachusetts and, of course, within Connecticut. So just thank you for those details. And, of course, congratulations on the WTS award. I know it was very well deserved.
Thank you. We have a really great team.
Oh, you mentioned Springfield. So Springfield is already called a terminus, or you use the word hub for a lot of the rail activity, both within Connecticut as well as Massachusetts, including the CT Rail Springfield Hartford line, and then as well as under the Compass Rail Plan. It's set to become a hub for both, you mentioned, the north-south as well as the east-west rail services. So let's talk specifically about the social and economic benefits. What do you see these new rail services bringing to the Springfield and surrounding area?
So I see a lot of beneficial synergies that can occur as we work to connect communities, because that really is what transportation is for. Along the West East Rail Corridor that connects Western Mass to Boston, we anticipate the service manifesting benefits in a lot of different ways. As you probably know, in Boston and the surrounding metro area, housing prices have really reached crisis levels. We're seeing people being priced out of their neighborhoods, and it's impacting various employers' ability to retain local workers and for people to stay in Massachusetts and close to their families. For people working in Boston, West East Rail provides an opportunity to seek housing in lower cost areas in Western Massachusetts. So for people currently in Western Mass, West East Rail presents an opportunity to access higher wage jobs in the Boston area, which also brings benefits to Boston employers seeking to broaden their talent pool. Speaking more generally, investments in transportation can lead to many opportunities for economic development, particularly around station areas. By increasing train frequency and extending the reach of service to new metro areas, we are making station areas more attractive as a place to live. This can catalyze the development of much-needed housing stock in the Commonwealth, and better transportation also makes station areas prime for siting a business as we work to attract commercial, retail, and industrial employers. The Connecticut River Valley holds a strategic position between Boston, Albany, and New York City, and it makes a lot of sense that we leverage this location's assets by investing in mass transportation infrastructure.
Of course, this is all very exciting for both Massachusetts as well as Connecticut. And As you know, Meredith, the Connecticut DOT is making its own improvements to the CT Rail Springfield Hartford line, including new rail stations, one in Windsor Locks near the Bradley Airport, as well as Enfield, which is very close to where our two states meet. How do you see Compass Rail benefiting off of the north, south, east, west corridors, specifically us here within Connecticut?
Yeah, so I think one of the most interesting aspects of our work that is that the benefits don't end at state borders. We as MassDOT and CTDOT, we've had a great working relationship for many years, and we've been working closely to plan and operate useful integrated rail services. All of the work we're doing in Massachusetts will absolutely benefit the residents of Connecticut. Going back to the early 2000s, Massachusetts and Connecticut recognized the economic importance of the shared Connecticut River Valley. At the time, the brand New England's Knowledge Corridor, Gateway to Innovation, was established. Say that three times fast. But the concept highlighted the region's impressive concentration of insurers, colleges and universities, advanced manufacturing, and health services, all sectors that continue to make the region economically strong. By continuing to invest in passenger rail improvements, we only strengthen our shared interests. For sure, Massachusetts residents are benefiting from the extensive investments CTDOT has made in the Hartford line over the years. I think some of the more tangible direct benefits for Connecticut residents will be the new one-seat rides that passengers from the Hartford line will be offered to points east of Springfield. For example, a rider from Hartford will be able to reach Worcester and Boston as soon as the inland route is launched. For Connecticut residents in New Haven or points west, the inland route will serve as an alternative or relief valve to Boston in the event the Northeast Corridor is experiencing issues. A little bit further out, when we begin a Boston to Albany service, time transfers at Springfield will present opportunities for Hartford line riders to switch to westbound trains destined for Pittsfield and Albany. And certainly for all examples where I mentioned benefits for Connecticut riders for accessing Massachusetts and upstate New York, there's also the opposite direction where Connecticut becomes more accessible for people from out of state. Transportation connects us and it generates the economic activity for all.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So you talked a lot about opportunities. So I'm going to pivot to the other side of the coin, as they say. What are some of the challenges that MassDOT is facing with implementing Compass Rail, and how are you addressing these challenges?
Challenges. What are those? No, you make a really good point. We have a lot of big plans, which inherently means we're going to face some big challenges. And the first challenge that comes to mind is the limitation of rail corridor capacity and the balance that we have to strike between freight and passenger rail. While MassDOT is the direct lead on advancing intercity passenger rail, my division is a strong proponent of the Commonwealth's freight network. When we plan for passenger rail improvements, we do it in a way that will not negatively impact freight operations. Often, this means developing infrastructure projects to grow corridor capacity. This is especially important on the CSX owned segment of the Boston and Albany corridor. Fortunately, CSX has been a great partner on our efforts, and that has helped us quite a bit. The other major challenge, unsurprisingly, will always be funding. Rail projects, as you know, are very expensive, and again, as I mentioned earlier, there is no federal formula program for intercity passenger rail the way there is for highways and transit. So the funding at the federal level is not always predictable. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been very fortunate in obtaining federal discretionary grants, but we've got a big wish list as part of Compass Rail, and we hope those opportunities for federal dollars continue.
Federal dollars usually follows public support. I wanted to talk about that just for a moment. What's been the public's reaction to Compass Rail? And what would you say to those that are either opposed or even neutral to more rail service?
So in Massachusetts, we have received overwhelming support for our Compass Rail initiatives. There's a lot of demand for intercity passenger rail, and we're hearing it from riders. The biggest proponents of West East Rail are understandably based in Western Massachusetts, where we've made the most substantial commitments for intercity rail. And local officials in Western Mass see much opportunity that can come from better connecting the region and economic centers in the Boston, Albany, and Connecticut metro areas. And the Healy Driscoll administration has really taken that concept and run with it. So we really have great advocates across the state. And opposition to increased rail service hasn't really been the problem. The criticisms we generally face are related to hurrying up our progress or requests to expand Compass Rail to additional corridors. And Of course, I can appreciate those sentiments because rail projects tend to take longer than the public expects, and every region will advocate for their priorities. Our charge at MassDOT is to keep things moving and efficiently deliver what we can with the resources that we have.
They can take a little while, but you and I are just learning to be patient ourselves, I guess. Thanks, Meredith. As we close out the conversation, which has been delightful today, would you like to tell us about any other major rail or transit projects that you have going on, or even any improvements your agency is undertaking? Love to hear about those.
Sure. So I really appreciate you inviting me to be on your podcast. It's a goal for us to spread the message of Compass Rail far and wide, and this has been a great opportunity. As far as other projects, we've got a lot going on. We're planning a new station in Palmer. We've just begun designing a grade separation project in West Springfield. And in October, we announced a $37 million award to design our Springfield area track reconfiguration project. That Springfield project is a big deal for Compass Rail Service and the CT rail trains that serve Springfield. The project will create room for increasing train frequency by separating passenger and freight movements, reconfigure tracks to reduce travel times, improve accessibility by adding or extending high level platforms, and create a new layover yard. We'd consider these projects under the banner of Compass Rail, but there are a lot of other projects that benefit Compass Rail services while not being exclusive to them. The most relevant example may be South Station expansion. South Station capacity has long been a known problem where insufficient platform space is limiting opportunity for expanded services. The issue is most acute for MBTA commuter rail service, but it also impacts Amtrak's Northeast Corridor services, as well as our planned Compass Rail services like the Inland Route. Full realization of the Compass Rail vision for expanded West-East rail service can't come to fruition until South Station expansion is complete. So all told, there are no dull moments in rail.
So, Meredith, follow up question. We have talked quite a bit about the east west rail service as well as the north south inland route, but Massachusetts as well as Connecticut are key stakeholders on the Northeast Corridor, which, for those of you who do not know, is the rail line with frequent rail service between Boston and Washington, D.C., as well as points in between. So, Meredith, you and I spend a lot of time on the Northeast Corridor Commission. What do you see as what does the near as well as the long term hold in store for us?
Well, Ben, yeah, the Northeast Corridor, and particularly the Commission, I feel like I grew up there. I did grow up in Washington, D.C., and my first real rail job was working at the Northeast Corridor Commission. But it's a really vital corridor it is the busiest rail corridor in North America. We have 2,000 daily trains between the Amtrak intercity service and the commuter operations on the corridor. And, we've seen where between DC and New York, intercity rail, Amtrak has really captured most of that market from people traveling those distances. And really, it's on the north end between New York and Boston where there's more opportunity for growth. And the more we can get people out of their cars for those kinds of trips, the more we can get reduce short haul flights. That's really going to be essential to accomplish our climate goals, as well as just make transportation between Boston and New York just more efficient and frankly more pleasant. I'm actually going to New York City tomorrow and taking Amtrak. So I really do think it's a vital part of the not just the regional economy, but it's really vital for the national economy. So the investments that Amtrak is able to make on the corridor that they've been able to make with the IIJA funds, and as well as all of the funds that the states are putting in, really makes a difference. Not as immediately as we all want, as we talked about. Rail projects take a long time, but this really is such a vital corridor, and to see those investments come to fruition is really just going to benefit Massachusetts and Connecticut, the whole region, as well as the rest of the country.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Huge thank you to our guest, Meredith Slesinger, for joining me today for this insightful discussion. Compass Rail, as you heard, has the exciting potential to transform rail service across our entire region that will enhance the quality of life, drive economic growth, and contribute to reducing emissions in the transportation sector. Importantly, though, the benefits of this visionary project will extend beyond Massachusetts, positively impacting our communities throughout Connecticut as well. We'll be sure to keep you updated as this project develops. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to continuing the conversation about the future of transportation. I'm Ben Limmer. Join us next time for another episode of Along the Lines. Thanks for listening to this episode of Along the Lines. This is your host, Benjamin Limmer. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe and share.